Friends, I am so glad that you came for this episode with a good friend of mine. It's a newer friend of mine that I was introduced to by my other friend, Laura Nelson. On the program today is none other than Dr. Tarryn McCarthy. Why is she so special to me? Well, let me just give you a little bit of her bio, but it's because there was a heart and soul connection the first time that I met her and talked to her, because she's the host of the Business of Happiness podcast. She's an orthodontist, author, keynote speaker, dental life coach, and rapid transformational therapist. So, only 7 years of clinical orthodontics and solo practice ownership, Tarryn experienced a breakdown, severe clinical burnout when she fire sold her practice. I'm out of here, she said. That's not in her bio. I added that. She fled the state and literally and figuratively ran from everything in her life. Can anybody relate to this? I mean, I know I can, right? What followed was a journey of reclamation of self she had disconnected from decades earlier. 5 years later, she would go on to open a scratch start practice and grow it to be the largest Invisalign practice in her state. After 23 years in clinical dentistry, she now coaches other leaders on reconnecting themselves in order to step into their true power. I am just so honored, Tarryn, that we're going to spend some time together and just share some peace and love and probably break a few branches along the way on the way down. So welcome to the show, Tarryn.
I love it. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week, Greg. So thank you for having me here.
I just think it's going to be amazing because on the Two Sleuth podcast, there's really no direction, although regular listeners think, oh, wow, that just seemed really thought out and planned out. So I'm just so grateful that Laura introduced us, and to be able to be so raw and vulnerable in so many different environments, and just what you put in your bio, right? Just to talk about the fact that you just fire sale fled, this is what it is. And then to be able to build something up, to know what it's like to tear oneself down and recognize that and build oneself up, and to be able to share from experience. That's what I know about you, is you share from experience. Tell me a little bit about where that comes from, that courage to do so.
The courage to share from experience? That's a great question. I think I was very terrified most of my life, feeling like I was different from everybody else. And I love saying that out loud because I know every single person who's listening feels the same way, which is such a shared human experience. But I think in dentistry and in business ownership, we try to hide that part of ourselves because we're trying to sell a product. Here I was trying to get people to work for the best dentist around and trying to get patients to come and see the best orthodontist around. So you got to uphold this image and this persona for to everybody, to the world. And so I was really scared of standing up in my truth and sharing those vulnerable parts for a very long time. But I'll share the story with you. Several years ago, my daughter, so this is being very vulnerable, and here we go. I now have really strengthened this muscle.
Welcome to the Two Sleuth podcast.
It happens fast.
This is what we do here.
It happens fast. I'll tell you what happened. Several years ago, my daughter, sophomore in high school, walked into the homecoming dance. And she and her younger brother, who's a year younger than she is, they walked into the homecoming dance, freshman and sophomore. And I was driving them and I watched them. And the reason why this moment was so poignant in my life is because up until that moment, my daughter had gone to school as a boy. And that was her moment in high school at the homecoming dance of coming out as her transgender identity. And no matter what you think or believe or know of people in your life, the courage, I'm getting emotional now because just thinking of the person I was as a sophomore in high school, the courage to stand up in her truth and say, this is who I am. In that moment, when I saw her do that and have her little brother stand and support her in that and walk into, literally, that was the first time she was ever showing this side of her persona, who now she's this beautiful woman. But the courage to stand in her truth amid so much fear. She was the only transgender child in her entire school. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, if she can do that at the tender age of 15, who am I not to? Who am I not to stand forward and actually be my true self, to say my truth, to speak my truth? And the power that she had in transforming my life in that moment, I realized when we do that, we allow others to see themselves. And we allow others to love themselves and make themselves not wrong. Because for so long, I told myself, for so many reasons, that I was so different, not good enough. In the meantime, we've all been feeling that way all along. And when someone says it, we recognize ourselves in it. And there's this healing that happens where we give ourselves grace.
Well, thank you for sharing that. What you're talking about that I'm hearing is so many of us feel apart from and not a part of. Even though we can be in this sea of people, be it at a dental conference or just in a room of people and still feel so alone. And the story that you're talking about with your daughter, I'm sure many of us have experienced this, not in that exact way, but the feelings behind it of imagine how long individuals like that, an individual like that, has carried that weight and burden with them alone. I can tell you that. So many people who are regular listeners know that, I didn't find recovery until I was 33. So, a raging alcoholic and drug addict. And so I took a different path in my life. Now, I can also tell you that there was periods of 6 months, 12 months during that time when I abstained, but it doesn't mean that I was sober. I was just dry, right? I was a raging anger management, out of control human being. So there was periods when I didn't consume, but it was just horrible. It was in existence. It wasn't a life I was living. So the amount of time that individuals suffer in silence. And if you look at the suicide rates for those that are in dental, right? I know it's the top 5, and I don't know if it's like second or third. The amount of suffering that happens in this industry alone due to the silence. And I was just speaking to another person in the industry, because even for myself, an entrepreneur, there are times when, yes, publicly, right, on socials and whatnot, giving the impression of the business is growing and thriving and everything is going great, but there still are challenges all along the way. And it's okay to not be okay. And it's
okay to not be
yes.
okay. And in fact, giving yourself that grace is where we start to heal. It's when we try to pretend that we're okay, when we actually prevent the healing. We prevent that turning point when we allow ourselves to come out on the other side. It's like pushing a inflated balloon into the water. Like I'm going to force myself to be okay. I'm going to force myself to be okay. And if we can just let go and allow it to just rise to the top, that's when we actually start to turn.
And it's so powerful just to be able to lift it up and talk about it, right? And give it life and breath and have conversation about it. I'm curious. So for someone like yourself to be in clinical for as long as you were, because there are a number of guests that have come onto the Two Sleuth podcast are entrepreneurs, and I love to hear about their journey of how they moved from one career to the next. And I had, a career before I got into dental 18 years ago. And I'm curious, what was that translation for you to go from clinical dentistry and a thriving, I think you said the largest Invisalign practice in the world. I don't know. I'm throwing
In the
extra
world.
stuff
You
in
got
there.
that right.
Yeah.
You got that right.
Yeah. The queen of the world, right? And so what was that like for you to move into now, sharing from your experience with others and helping them to identify how to come into a more true, authentic self? What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, it took a lot of soul searching because I had a lot of preconceived notions on what success looks like and what it means to be a doctor, an orthodontist. So, isn't it so interesting that sometimes it's our labels that become our limitations? So, that label of doctor, of dentist, actually for a while held me back from what I was really being called to do, which is supporting and coaching and guiding and and sharing these experiences with my colleagues. But I think that one of the things I learned very early on in dentistry, when I had that practice that really felt like such a drudgery and I was so burned out, and then I came back, did a lot of healing on myself, and came back and built this beautiful practice that I loved. The shift for me in between those two moments was, number one, learning how to take care of myself. That was a big, big thing. And a big part of that, as you and I have both talked about, is really falling in love with meditation and finding quiet. Because I think for so long I was just push, 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 do, do, do. And I wasn't taking that precious quiet time to listen to myself. But another thing I realized was it wasn't dentistry, it wasn't teeth for me that lit me up. It wasn't the straightening of teeth that made me very excited to get out of bed in the morning. It was empowering people. And so when I had that realization of what lit me up, what my purpose was, my practice flourished because I wasn't straightening teeth anymore. I was empowering people with their smiles. I was giving them the tools to, and that's why Invisalign worked so well for me. This is not a plug for aligners, but for me, it was giving teenagers this opportunity to change their own smile. I was putting it in their hands. I was empowering them to change something that about themselves that they thought was impossible. You know, when you're 14, you're like, oh my gosh, my teeth are crazy looking. And yet through daily diligence, intention, loving yourself through the hard parts, forgiving yourself through the struggles, they transformed their smiles. And for me, that's what got me out of bed in the morning. So it was tapping back into what lit me up, which made the transition to coaching so beautiful, because here I was empowering people in another way. It was just tapping into that part that really resonated with my values in terms of what I'm here to bring in this beautiful lifetime.
Well, and I love that you really highlighted for the teenage population and them to empower themselves through slow, diligent, consistent, over a period of time, these small little incremental changes. Because you and I both know, and I talk about this often, right? The Instagram story society, the instant fix, the click, 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 click through the stories where they're not really engaged with much of anything. And it's the same for me. Finding that passion for me was, I mean, yes, fixed full arch dentistry, the teeth in a day, right? The reveal, the emotional reveal really is what was the hook that got me involved. But what really my passion became all about was empowering clinicians and their teams. Because there's nothing more frustrating when I'm working with clients and say they're doing a couple arches a month, right? Or 3 or 4, and they've hit that ceiling and they don't understand why they can't do more, right? They'll spend more money on marketing, but it's not actually bringing in more arches. They're working with their team and their team's frustrated because the doctor's frustrated because the profitability isn't increasing, and fill in the blank. And then to be able to come in and share with them, with myself and my coaches and team members, sharing with them whether they're answering the leads and the lead calls and taking them into consults and the consultations into starts and working with the doctors and even the back office and the front office, the whole team. And you see the success that they start to have and overcoming the frustrations once you work on the change management and all the other things. But watching that transformation is so amazing and beautiful. And what I found my passion is in teaching. It always has been.
Beautiful.
From the very beginning, from the time I was very young. And so, like, the full arch in the dental is kind of the conduit into
the
being able
vehicle.
to share this gift. It's the vehicle to share this gift with others. And that's what I'm hearing you say, because it's what success looks like. It's what is the avenue where I'm just paving a path. And if you want to come on the train, that's great. And some don't, and some aren't ready to. And it doesn't make them a bad person, but a modified EOS model of right person, right seat, and finding what really helps them to find and bring joy. Because many of them when given the tools and they start to experience that success, you just see them light up, and there's nothing like it in the world. Do you
Yeah.
get to experience that in your passion as well?
Absolutely. And it is so rewarding. And I think what it takes, this is wrapping it right back to what you started the hour with, is what it takes is being willing to be vulnerable enough to look at yourself and where the pain points are and what does actually light you up. And we can't have one without the other. It's so interesting. People want, we all want to feel good all the time. But the truth is that we can't suppress some emotions and not suppress them all. We can't not feel anger or sadness and choose to only feel the joy, happiness all the time. So we actually allow ourselves to experience all of them. And the same is true, I think, in terms of discovering our passions. In order to discover your passion, you kind of need to know what you don't like, what doesn't work for you, what doesn't feel so good. And that really requires us to allow ourselves to be a little bit vulnerable, to share with ourselves first, to even be open enough to ourselves. I think sometimes we're pushing through and pushing past the pain and the discomfort because we don't want to face it, but we're also losing out on the beautiful insight. We're losing out on the precious message that's underneath that, which is for us. I always say this, and my dental colleagues out there will know this. We know from our patients that no two patients feel pain the same way, right? Like, you touch one patient and she could jump out of the chair. Like, you barely put your hands on her shoulders and she's flying out of the chair. And then another little kiddo will be there like, gosh, this must really hurt. And he's just totally lying there, not moving a muscle. And you realize, oh, isn't that interesting? Everybody has a different perception of pain, a different tolerance of pain. And at different points in our lives, we have different perceptions of pain and tolerances of pain, right? Based on a multitude of factors. The reason why that's so valuable is because it's unique to each of us. And nobody knows you like you know you. That's it. And if we are pushing through feeling the pain, we're losing out on that precious knowing for ourselves. I know you and I have talked as well, Greg, about our recovery journey. I'm also a recovering alcoholic. And I know that in experiencing that deep pain, I learned so much about myself. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but that is what really taught me about who I am. And I wouldn't give it up for anything, honestly, because I've learned so much about myself, but it required me to actually be present for it. What I was using alcohol for was to numb the pain because I didn't want to feel it. And the longer I numbed the pain, the less I knew about myself, the more I could fool myself and not know about myself. And I was really good at faking it. I was really good at showing up as somebody else every single day. I built a whole practice doing that, thinking that that was success and not realizing that actually sometimes our greatest insight is in actually giving ourselves permission to sit with and be available for feeling the pain.
Yeah, and you're talking about the precious message, and I think of that as, the learning tools, and it's the message, right? The mess that you go through to learn the message.
I love that.
And as you were talking about, you can't suppress just parts of our feelings and our emotions without suppressing them all. And, active addiction, that's what we were doing, of course, but you can do it even without addiction. You can do it with a lot of different things as you're trying to disconnect, right, and not be a part of. But when you were describing that, it reminded me of the movie Parenthood from 1989 with Steve Martin. And toward the very end, the grandma, she has very little part in the movie, but she's sitting at the kitchen table toward the very end, and she talks about, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm going to bastardize it for sure, but she says, some people go to the fair and they like the merry-go-round. It just goes round and round and round. Not me. I like the roller coaster with the big ups and downs in life. And that's what I think of, right? The suppression of the emotions. You're just on this carousel. You're just existing, right? And for me, I'll take the roller coaster every day. Because the higher the high, the lower the lows. Now, of course, you don't want too far of extremes, right? Because that's rattling, but I want to feel all the emotions, right? And you can't have like constant dopamine hits because that's just not sustainable, right? You want to be able to feel the balance of the highs and the lows and experience the whole breadth of feelings and emotions, because I wasn't feeling any until 19 some odd years ago when I got sober. And then it's like, well, now we have to go through the exercise of identifying that feeling and name that feeling. So
I
that
know.
was a whole
And isn't that
exercise. Yeah.
it's a whole new thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love speaking to other people who've gone through recovery where it's like, oh, wait a minute, now I have to actually feel these feelings. And then you get to learn to appreciate them. But it's scary at first, especially those feelings that we really feel uncomfortable with in society, like anger. Anger was one that was really uncomfortable for me to feel. And I think, especially in dentistry, we get triggered so often, and this facade of professionalism that we have to uphold the whole time actually serves as that numbing agent, right? Like, it's not alcohol, but now it's work, right? And it's this pretense of, I'm the doctor and I'm the leader, I'm the business owner, I have to hold it all together. And we sometimes can use that as a reason to dissociate from our emotions. We just kind of have to hold it together. And while that's very true from a healthcare provider standpoint, it's, you're not going to feel safe as a patient if your doctor is crying, right, is losing it. Like, I'm not going to feel safe in your hands. So yes, that's a professional requirement, is we have to hold it together and create safety for our patients in our hands. But there has to be a space that we allow ourselves to process those emotions and feel them at the end of the day. And I think that's where so much of our burnout is unspoken about, is, yes, we do too much. Yes, we don't give ourselves enough of a chance to rest and to take vacation and to take a break. Yes, we don't delegate enough or ask for help enough. But another big part of it is we don't give ourselves the chance to feel. We don't give ourselves to process those emotions of, that patient just yelled at me. It's her own trauma response, but man, it hurts. Or that mom of my patient just, said some really hurtful things, and I'm a human being, and that really felt a certain way. Or a team member just gave her 2-week notice, and I'm feeling big feelings about it. And so often we can use that guise of professionalism to keep those emotions at bay. And we don't even realize that they're building, 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 building inside of us, like that balloon we kept trying to push down underwater. And it's exhausting and a big contributing factor to burnout.
Or for clients that we work with at G&A Consult, even though we're in the full arch lane, many times that they have, a GP side of their practice as well, and they have a patient and they'll accept some insurance, and that patient says, oh, well, that Crown just put your kid through college, and no, the reimbursement from the insurance was $200. I don't think that did that. But these are the comments, and they can't really react in the moment. And that can be like, that can be really triggering. And how do you respond to that? And I'm curious because, I know that what you're dealing with and what you work with in group settings and whatnot are very highly successful clinicians, entrepreneurs in this setting that are very driven with big goals and huge visions and huge dreams. And so with individuals like that, I mean, you may be talking to one right now, right? When you're working with individuals like that, this sense of having some type of balance, right? If you use the phrase work-life balance, there's a lot of cutesy stuff out there of like trying to call it something different, but balance is really what's needed, right? It was always a word that I, repulsed from earlier in sobriety. It's like, no, I want to, have some balance in my life. Is this something that you find you can help others to at least understand, let alone try to achieve?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, what I learned was, because I have big dreams and I have big goals. And sometimes I made myself feel wrong for that. I thought, oh, I'm not good enough mom because I'm a business owner and creator, or I kept making myself feel bad about the big goals and dreams I had. And what I've learned is the how of seeing those big dreams and goals through is learning the more taking care of yourself more. So the bigger your dreams, the more you need to take care of yourself and give yourself those moments of rest and opportunity to feel your feelings. That's all. It doesn't mean less. It's possible. It's actually, our programming is that in order to get more, you have to do more. And I've learned it's actually the opposite. It's actually, in order to create more, I actually have to take even deeper care of myself. And that really starts with what you were talking about, Greg, is the vulnerability to share with yourself, like, I'm actually feeling stress or sadness about today. So I went through this thing today with my patient, and now I'm going to feel my feelings, because that's the only way for me to get up tomorrow morning and hit the ground running. If I keep suppressing this and not allowing myself to feel this, or let's talk about exhaustion, recognizing, I just was talking to several clients within this past week, and, the summers can be tiring because we're running big practices. Patients generally have time over the summer, especially in orthodontics. I know in the orthodontic world, so we see a lot of patients. So we're burning the candle at both ends. Many of our team members are taking time off this time of year. So sometimes we're functioning with thinner staff numbers, and we're squeezing in paddleboarding at night, or going to the zoo with our kids, or, going on date night. And so we're actually doing a lot more. So the exhaustion level is high at this time of the summer. The number of days in the summer feel very limited. We're near the end. We got to squeeze it all in. And we don't give ourselves permission to be tired. But that right there is the key to balance, is recognizing what your body needs. Recognizing, I need to either feel this feeling or get some rest, listening to yourself and paying attention to those cues. So I don't think there's any mystery about it, other than the fallacy we've been telling ourselves that we need to do more in order to achieve more. The secret to achieving more is just listening, really paying attention to yourself and what you need.
Yeah, that the listening piece, that is so critically important, and listening to self and implementing the self-care, which we referenced a little bit earlier. That's a very poignant message that I've been working on this week as we speak. So thank you for that reminder, for sure. Well, Tarryn, this is the part of the program all of my guests play a little something called What the Sleuth is Going On? It's 3 rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready to play?
Let's do it.
Okay. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
I still think it's garlic. Garlic's pretty bad. It really is. It really is bad, because it just doesn't go away. What's your answer to that question, Greg?
I'm going to get in a lot of trouble if I answer this one truthfully, but I will.
Go. Let's do it. Bring that vulnerability. I want to see it.
My 3rd grade teacher, her name was Mrs. Ott. I don't know what she drank, and now I identify it as perio breath, but I know she drank a lot of coffee like the first couple of hours, and oh my gosh, I mean, it was enough to make the hair stand up on my head. I can still smell it to this day, just thinking about it.
I think that combo of perio and coffee might actually win this round. I think you got me there.
It was pretty bad. Okay, question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
It would be I'd show even more teeth.
Come on, I mean, you have such a broad smile. I love your smile.
I know, but like Julia Roberts, you can see her second molar.
Oh, I know. Yeah, she does. She's like all big smile. Yes.
I love it. That's what I would change.
All right. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. Question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own, which one would you choose and why?
You mean it has to be one that's already existing?
Yeah, that's kind of the premise of the question.
Okay. If I could go back and choose, I would say, I I guess I would say aligners, because those were such a big part of the empowering piece for me, and I believe in that part of it so deeply, but really from a place of empowering people with the health in their own hands, less about aligning their teeth and more about putting that empowerment in their own hands. Because I think, now you got me going, I'll just say this briefly, but the truth is that we have so much more power over our lives than we realize. We have so much more power over our happiness and our success than we realize. And there's nothing more beautiful than recognizing that power in yourself and realizing it has nothing to do with the world around you, and that you deserve and have the power to create the life of your dreams. So that's a long roundabout answer. So I'd say aligners.
So much truth in that. Definitely worth every word and second that you did share it. Well, Tarryn, I want to respect your time and my listening audience's time. So in the last few minutes, is there anything I haven't asked you, or any words of wisdom that you want to leave with my listening audience today?
No, just that you deserve to take care of yourself. I think that's the biggest thing, is that that's the one power that we all have, that we don't give ourselves enough grace to do, to tap into, is to really take care of yourself and not wait for other people to bring that to you, but really take that radical personal responsibility to ask for what you need and give yourself rest when you need to.
Love it. And if individuals here, my guest on the Two Sleuth podcast has been Dr. Tarryn McCarthy. If anyone has been resonating with what you're saying, what's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
www.thebizofhappiness.com or the Business of Happiness podcast.
Excellent. So tune in to that podcast or just reach out through the website. It's been a true pleasure, my friend Tarryn. Thank you so much for coming on the show.